Is it a mere coincidence that the day after I released a highly sensitive special report on the rigging plans for the 2027 presidential elections being complete, the floodgates of rigging news and information and updates and analysis have opened in our media? Is it a mere coincidence? To the controversy yesterday over the removal of the immediate former chief executive officer of the IEBC, Marjan Hussein, people are still talking about the rigging story because there have been complaints against him. The opposition, the united opposition, have said that there is no way there can be a free and fair election without rigging, with Marjan Hussein there. But then the timing in politics, the timing always tells a story. Always, without fail. To the very latest election rigging controversy, the story of a Zimbabwean businessman, Wicknell Chivayo, or Sir Wicknell as he likes calling himself, and his constant visits to Kenya and to State House to visit President Ruto. Timing again. Barely 18 months to a general election in Kenya. Now, Bwana Chivayo has been linked to at least 2 controversial disputed elections in South Africa and Namibia, where he supplied election materials. Now, ordinarily, any politician in any country of the world is usually very careful about who they associate with, the reputation of the people they associate with. Yeah, because usually, this is politics, it reflects back on them. Now, Bwana Chivayo has been jailed in the past for fraud, money laundering. This is the person who constantly visits State House, Nairobi. And that is not all about this dark, mysterious, controversial character. Every time he comes to Kenya, now this is crazy information, every time he comes into Kenya, there is a certain airport he uses. And it is not the JKIA. No. He always comes in through Eldoret International Airport. Why? Why this particular airport? Well, we know that there are a few differences between our main international airport and Eldoret International Airport. One of them is you cannot expect the same security protocol, the same heightened security and searches when somebody is coming to the country. You cannot expect them to be the same at these 2 airports. I'm not saying anything, I'm just stating facts. And now this is the same person who is a constant visitor to State House to see the president. Now this is very strange, and it is hardly surprising that the government has not been able to explain when members of the press call for comment. No government official is willing to comment on this matter. Why? And mainly to answer a very simple, straightforward question. Why should such a controversial character with a shady past be a constant visitor to State House to see the president? And to make matters worse, somebody who has been linked to stolen elections coming into the country barely 18 months before the country goes into a very, very critical, crucial general election. And in fact, a general election where a very, very unpopular political outfit called UDA is seeking to retain power. You know, when you put all those facts together, it does not paint a rosy picture. In fact, it is cause for great concern. It would cause anybody who loves their country, Kenya, to be very worried indeed. And with good reason. Now, in my special report, there is a lot of very crazy, terrifying, worrying information about the possibility of a rigged general election. Okay? But for the purposes of my show today, I want to focus on something that may point to these constant visits by Bwana Chivayo, or Sir Wicknell, as he calls himself, to Kenya, okay, through an airport that is not the main airport. And it is all in one name that has been appearing a lot in the news in recent times, Smartmatic. Okay, this is a supplier of software for elections. There are a lot of things happening over this election software, not only in Kenya, especially in the United States of America, where too many questions are being asked, okay, about this thing that originated in the country called Venezuela, okay? But let us also not forget that the main reason why Marjan Hussein, the immediate former CEO of the IEBC, hurriedly, suddenly exited his job had something to do with the same Smartmatic. You see, their contract was expiring. And the CEO, ignoring the law, ignoring the laid down procedure, renewed the contract. Hapo ndo kiini ya hii shida. Okay? That is the root cause of the whole Marjan Hussein fiasco. Now, by simply reading between the lines, the writing is on the wall. It is highly unlikely that this software is going to be used again in the upcoming general election. I think that is more than obvious. And so, one may have the idea that maybe people should look at an alternative. You know, evil people who want to fiddle with an election. Enter the Zimbabwean businessman, Wicknell Chivayo. I'm sure you're following so far, because he has supplied election material to countries where there has been a controversy over the election results, possibly stolen elections, which may suggest that maybe some people are looking for another way other than Smartmatic. In all this mess, that would make some perfect sense, wouldn't it? Yet another confirmation that we're in the season of exposure. Because I'm sure somebody somewhere would have known that Kenyans hardly pay attention to foreign news, just like in any other country. I mean, we have enough local news to deal with. There is no time to look at what is happening in other countries. And therefore, it would have been easy for somebody to imagine that this Bwana Chivayo would just come into the country through Eldoret Airport, go to State House, and nobody would notice who this heavily built man is. Nobody would have any idea. But oh boy, oh boy. Wrong season, my friends. Eish. Because I'm going to surprise most of us. Long before this story has broken out in mainstream media, it is the front page story in today's Nation newspaper. Long before today, this story has been all over social media for months. And ordinary Kenyans, I'm sure most of them not even trained journalists, have been making the link. Hey. But now with all these election manenos coming to the forefront, 18 months to D-Day, mainstream media have jumped on to the bandwagon. And it does not look good at all. How are you going to explain this? Because even the way this man enters the country, usually, is very suspicious. But I dare add, is consistent with his past and his reputation. Hey, for those who would want to steal an election. In the heat of a general election, I'll give you a very good example. In the run-up to the last general election, including presidential election, a man called Kamango, was found with sensitive election material entering the country at the JKIA. Now, of course, that was devastating news. That was major news. But then Kenyans were already very engrossed, very tied to the heat, the rough and tumble of a general election, which was only a few days away. And therefore, it was very easy to push this breaking news under the carpet. And it was easy for Kenyans to forget. Yeah, because in the end, you know what happened? Bwana Kamango was released, despite being arrested, was ultimately released without being charged. Yeah, and yet clearly there are a number of laws which had been broken, including entering the country with a false passport. I'm sure most of us remember that. But in this instance, we are many, many months away from the general election. Campaigns have not even started. And therefore, it is very easy for pressure to mount, for people to focus on these dodgy things which are happening, linked to an election, which most Kenyans now believe there is going to be an attempt to rig. Do you see the problem? For those who would want to steal an election? I'm sure you do. This is definitely not good news for them. As it is highly unlikely that this Zimbabwean tycoon will again swagger into the country, because if that happens, Kenyans will be alert. Kenyans will be paying attention, because the man is all over the news for the wrong reasons, of course. I would like to end my show today with some encouragement, okay? And it is not just encouragement for the sake of it. I'm sure some of us are aware that there are situations where it becomes impossible to rig an election. And the way things are going in Kenya, that is exactly where we are headed. Oh yes. Surely to rig an election, you need to do your things chini ya maji. It is important that people do not notice what is happening. It is important that people do not notice certain visitors into the country being linked to anything to do with elections that are stolen. Okay? But that is not what is happening in this case. There are other reasons, which I state in my highly sensitive special report, that clearly point to a situation where it will be impossible to rig the next elections in the country called Kenya. Now, you don't have much time left. Yeah, there is a small window of opportunity for you to get your hands on this crazy information. Okay? I believe you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 2,999, you can have this very informative, highly sensitive special report with a lot of mind-blowing information, some of which you may find difficult to believe. And so if you're in a position to, please move quickly, because this offer is in what we call in Kenya, kwa kipindi cha lala salama. It is concluding very shortly. And so to avoid disappointment, you will need to move fast. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.